Is there a text even anywhere that informs us that this is what the seed is of the devil?
Welcome back to part 2 of our episode where we seek to answer the question, is the Christian gospel in any way, shape, or form present in Genesis 3? Are Christian interpreters justified and correct about reading the promise of a future Messiah in the curse that Yahweh made to the serpent in Genesis chapter 3? So, without further ado, folks, let's kick it back to part 2, and I'll see you at the end.
Yeah.
Now, I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier about sacred space,
Yeah.
and more particularly to what is often a misinterpretation or something that most Christian readers do when they read this chapter is they sort of presuppose that Adam and Eve were first created immortal, or in some sense, a death, as you read Romans, had not entered the world yet. So what does that mean? And is that really what Genesis says? What's really happening?
We really have to look at how this story finishes. So as I mentioned, the assumption is because the text in Genesis actually let's put yours on the screen here. And Yahweh God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Out of the ground Yahweh God made grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then I think he makes the man after that, right? So notice what I had pointed that this out sort of towards the beginning, that these two trees, like, they're together, they're connected, right? They're
Right.
importantly, yeah. So this geographical description of the land, we can skip over that down to like 2:15. He takes the man, he put him in the garden to till and to keep him, and then he gives him this commandment: you may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you may not eat from it, for in the day that you eat of it you shall die. So there's the commandment. And people will often look at this text and say, well, the tree of life was in the garden, and because he didn't specify you can't eat from this tree, they must have been eating from it, and that's the source of their immortality. Therefore, they were immortal. Well, that's not really what the text says. And if we go to sort of the end of the story, after Yahweh issues the curses, and now I'm reading from chapter 3. I think this starts in verse 22. I'll read verses 22 to 24, and this is my translation again. Then Yahweh God said, see now, the Adam, the man, has become like one of us, knowing good and bad. So what prevents that he might stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life, eat, and live forever? So Yahweh God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from where he was taken. He drove out the Adam and stationed on the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming whirling sword to guard the way of the tree of life. So importantly, like, look at what God says here. What prevents that he might stretch out his hand and take also? You could also translate this, and take now from the tree of life, eat, and live forever. So based on what Yahweh says, it seems clear to me that Adam and his woman have not yet eaten from the tree of life, because he makes this declaration. What if he does it now that he knows, good and bad? What if he now eats from the tree of life? So it's a subtle point, but it's a really important one, I think. This idea that, and that's also why I think the command the instruction by God when he says, if you eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. Because they were mortal beings, they understood that they weren't going to live forever already. So it's not like this was the removal of immortality. In fact, that actually doesn't make the story work. Not really. Not if you're looking at it in the context of the broader ancient Near Eastern world, where you have these features, right? The pursuit of immortality and divine knowledge or divine wisdom. It's always a pair. And if you're seeing the same thing in this story, which I think we should, given that it's there, let's treat it like we would these other stories, and in conversation with these other contemporary stories, then these are mortal beings, and the concern is that they are going to become immortal, and the way to prevent them from doing so is to prevent their access from the tree of life.
So it's because they lose access to this tree, which perhaps prior to the meeting of this other tree, they were too innocent to abuse that power, so to speak.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
it's the way I see it, because that's the other thing too. The other point made multiple times through this story, what actually happens to the couple when they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the text says that their eyes were opened. Right? So to me, that communicates something about them. Like, yes, that's a colloquialism. It's metaphoric for, attaining this knowledge, this great insight. But I think there's probably something very tangible in that too, that they could see things that they couldn't see earlier. Their eyes were open and suddenly they were aware of this other tree. I don't necessarily think that means that the tree was invisible. I tend to think that they just had no awareness of its significance. So now, with the acquisition of knowledge of good and bad, they do. Or at least they will come to understand its significance. Without that knowledge of good and bad, there's no concern that they're ever going to understand what the tree of life does.
Gotcha. So it's not their disobedience that brought about the death.
No.
The possibility of death is what they usually try to teach you.
Yeah, well, and that's how the Christian, that's how Paul, and that's how the New Testament writers understood this story, right? They're turning its message on its head. And I think I pointed this out on David McDonald's podcast when I talked about Genesis 2 and 3, and it blew his mind. Like, there's no sin in this story.
That's
The
another
words,
thing. Yeah.
the words for sin or transgression in the Hebrew Bible do not appear in this text. It's not there. And there's no fall. That's also a concept or an idea that's rather foreign to this text. This is something I learned very early on when I started university, was that the Christian concept of iniquity or sin or the fall of mankind was here in Genesis chapter 3, but that from a Jewish perspective it was much different. This is not how they read this text. In fact, a better place to locate original sin for a Jewish reader is probably in Genesis 6, with the daughters of men being taken by the sons of God, and them bearing these gigantic offspring. And then, the text says that they multiplied all manner of wickedness, impurity, and violence. That's sort of the first big problem.
Another one of those little misinterpretations. What about the serpent? We have lots of Christian commentators.
Who is this?
This is from Bruce Waltke.
Oh, okay.
These are the guys I read while I was in seminary. It says, in the ancient Near East, in varying contexts, serpents are symbols of protection, like the Egyptian Uraeus, of evil, deadly poison, like Apopis, of fecundity, like
Yeah,
the Canaanite fertility goddess, or of continuing life, renewal of skin, which is what we talked about earlier.
that's right.
He says, here the serpent is a symbol of anti God. Although not named here, he is the adversary of God and humanity, called the Satan. And then he goes on to elaborate his case. But is it really Satan here?
Well, the New Testament certainly alludes to this, right?
Okay.
But again, this is not native to the text. And the serpent, I think, is probably a divine being of some sort. Like, I think there's a couple different ways you can go, and because it's such a rich, complex story, I think you can that all of this stuff is still built into the text. So, on the one hand, this is an etiology. This is a story which helps to explain things that people do and the reasons for them. You know, stuff that's addressed in this text. Why do we have to work so hard? For our food. Farming sucks. Why do we have to do it? That's answered in this story. Why why is it so painful for women when delivering children? So difficult for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's answered by this story. Snakes, I think you could see as natural pests for farmers and for pastoralists and agriculturalists, right? So, some of that is built into this story too, as part of the curse on the snake. He says, um, there will be enmity between your offspring and the offspring of the woman. He, that is the offspring of the woman, will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. So, it's big, and this is how, there were medieval Jewish commentators who understood the text in this fashion, and they would say, snakes have to strike at the heel of a human being, but can still kill him in that position, but has to do so because he's stuck crawling on his belly on the ground. And this is an explanation for that. So
Yeah, it's
that's
kind of
one
like
side of this.
how come the lizard doesn't have legs anymore, or this particular
Right.
one lost its legs?
Yes, and
You
importantly,
know.
like, that is part of later Jewish tradition as well, that the snake had limbs and was delimbed in the
Mhm.
process of the curse. Even though that's not in the text, that's what some Jewish commentators thought about this into the medieval period, right? So that's one side of it. Is this etiology that helps to explain? There's another one I thought. Why are we ashamed by our own nakedness and the nakedness of others to the point that we have to cover up and wear
Mhm.
clothes, like things like that, right? Um, so what separates us from the animals?
That's
Uh,
an interesting contrast that I want to make with the Adapa and the South Wind. Is
mm,
that it seems like it's protocol in the Adapa myth that whoever's approaching the god, as you would expect, like someone being summoned by the king, that you have to come in dressed in a certain way, or so one of the things, the first thing that he does is he gives them royal clothing
yes,
before Adapa
yeah,
gets to get even close to Anu. But in here, Yahweh doesn't seem to have a problem with Adam and Eve walking around naked.
no. Um, I think the so I tend to look because there's it this text is working on multiple levels, right? I'm gonna pull this up, and just because I saw it, and I'll just respond to this quickly. Um, it's the verb can either be bruise or strike. But importantly, I think it's important to note it's the same verb that's used for the seed of the woman and the snake. So they're doing the same thing to each other,
That's
right?
important
Just
because
to the
I've
to
heard.
the head and the heel. Well, And like this is Paul, right? He says something about soon the God of peace will crush
Crush.
the head of Satan under your foot. So,
But that's not what's
there's
in mind here.
that's not really what's in view here. I think the rabbinic commentators probably understood this ideological elements of the story along with a variety of the other ones. Well, with regards to the clothing, I was going to say in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is another story that has a lot in common with the Adam and Eve story. And, the Adam and Eve story is clearly in conversation with the Epic of Gilgamesh. But when the wild creature Enkidu, he lives in the forest, right? And and he runs around naked and he he foils Gilgamesh and all of the hunters of Uruk. So when Shamhat the prostitute is sent into the solution for all the problems that Enkidu is causing Gilgamesh is for Gilgamesh to say, I know how to solve this problem. I'm gonna go send a woman into the woods to have sex with him. So, which, right away you're kind of like, what? But there's a connection here, right? Like what happens in the story is it says that Enkidu has sex with Shamhat the prostitute for 7 days and 7 nights, and then he gets up and all the forest creatures run away from him. And the first thing that Shamhat says to him is, you have become wise, Enkidu, like a god. Come, let me take you to Uruk. And then she puts clothes on him and takes him into the city. So, there's a connection here between this acquisition of knowledge and the need to cover up, to clothe yourself. And it seems to be something that in these stories takes place through sexual intercourse. So, and that's the other part of this story that we haven't touched on at all, and that's the sexual innuendo that's built into the eating from the tree of knowledge. The verb that's most commonly used by the non-priestly writer in Genesis for coitus, for sexual intercourse, is yada, which means to know. And I don't think this is an accident that it's the tree of knowledge of good and bad. And there is some ambiguity here in the story about whether or not this was a sexual connection made between the woman and the snake, the serpent, the Nakash. In fact,
Yeah, I mean, serpents they behave very seductively.
yeah, right. In fact, there's a one of the I believe it's one of the Targums, the Targum Pseudo Jonathan makes this connection pretty explicit, and I'll just pull this up for you. It says that now in the Targum Pseudo Jonathan, it actually portrays the snake creature as a wicked angel named Samael in disguise. And it says, when the woman saw Samael, the angel of death, she was afraid. That's in Genesis chapter 3 verse 6. And as you read on through the story, God's reaction, the curses on the snake, the woman, and the ground, it's later revealed that Samael seduced the woman and had sexual intercourse with her. In Targum Pseudo Jonathan Genesis 4:1, it says that Adam knew his woman Eve had become pregnant by Samael, the angel of Yahweh. She was desirable to the angel, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain and said, I have created a man, an angel of Yahweh. So,
Oh, wow. It's like she got her own little tutorial. This is how
Yeah,
you
there
do
you
it.
go, right? Yeah, this is how it's done. Now, the reason why, let's put your accordance back up here, and go to Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Listen, the reason why the rabbinic commenters thought this is because of what happens in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. So this is on RSV, right? The man knew his wife, there's that word, yada, to know, his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have produced a man with the help of the Lord.
There
Now,
it is.
this is what's interesting. There's a couple ways that you can actually translate this text. You
Yeah,
could
my
just
guess is gonna
say,
be how that et is functioning here, right?
right, that could be a definite article, just the object. I have created is a common a common way of translating this verb. In particular, within other ancient Near Eastern creation texts, they'll use this verb kana, right, to
Mm,
create. So she says, I have created a man. This could be the object, Yahweh, which is kind of weird. The other way you
right.
could read this too is, I have created a man with Yahweh, not with the help of Yahweh, but just with Yahweh. And I think that's where the Targum is getting this idea, right? The Targum says, I have created a man, the angel of Yahweh. So it's clearly reading this text as if the woman has had a sexual encounter with the serpent, with the Nachash. And and there's certainly, like, lots of the imagery at play in the story with the tree is desirable. It's pleasing to the eye. Um
Mhm.
the image of eating is occasionally used in the Hebrew Bible as a metaphor for lust and for sexual gratification. So, you know, it's kind of connected in there.
Yeah, and within the context of, hey, my command is for you to be fruitful and multiply,
Hmm.
right? Fill the earth. You'd think that a tutorial in how to reproduce would be helpful. It makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It
Um,
does. There you go. I won't. Oh no, not that one. Okay, cool. Well, did you want to? We haven't even looked at any videos yet. Do you want to look at a couple of these?
so I think perhaps if we were to pick like the last one to sort of unravel here is what's really happening in verse 15,
Yeah.
because that's the one that oftentimes apologists or Christian commentators will say, yeah, look, the gospel was prophesied here, the coming of Jesus and his death and all that. It's in Genesis. And therefore, you should believe it because, it's the New Testament revealed in the Old Testament or whatever.
Yes. Yes. Of course it
So
is.
I'd like to know like what's really happening here. I do have an example of how this
Sure.
eisegesis is done, and it's a 12-minute video. I could maybe try to speed it up and so we can watch it quickly, but I think it's just crazy to see it happening in real life.
Now, I'll say a couple of things. Like, I think in Genesis 2:15, I lean much more strongly towards the ideological understanding of this text. But I think too, there is something at play throughout the book of Genesis, where part of what's happening here is, this is setting up a recurring trope in Genesis, where you see this conflict between seeds, between offsprings, you know, Cain and Abel, and then you see it in Jacob and Esau. this struggle. It's there between Isaac and Ishmael. There's this ongoing concern throughout Genesis that there's going to be this conflict between the I guess the preferred or the chosen offspring and the rejected offspring. I think I do think that it's starting to set up here in this text, and that does flow into this reading in Genesis 4, where Cain is the offspring of this union. He's the bad one, and Abel's the good one. And Abel is murdered and then is replaced, right, by Seth. So there's these lineages of this lineage that's favored by Yahweh and this lineage that's rejected by Yahweh. It's not always directly genealogical, because you also see it in, like I said, another place is in like the curse of Noah, in, I think that's Genesis 9, where he gets drunk, and he ends up naked in his tent, and his two sons, Shem and Japheth, cover him. His third son, Ham, is disrespectful about the situation, and as a result, Noah curses Ham's descendant, Canaan, and says, you're going to be a slave to your brothers, which are really your uncles, Shem and Japheth, like the rest of the days of your life, right? So there's this repeating pattern of like blessing and cursing that I think starts here and has to do with offspring. I don't think it goes much deeper than that. Other texts from the Bible, other Jewish commentators certainly pick up on this idea in terms of seeing the righteous line of David through like the house of Judah, and you've got other prophecies to that effect, right, in places like in Genesis chapter 49 or in Numbers chapter 23, Balaam's oracle, right, with regards to with regards to the scepter and the star. So I think they're picking up on this idea that's already established in these early chapters of Genesis, of these lines of blessing and cursing, and the Davidic line kind of becomes the idealization of that. But I would say that is the picture of David and in the line of Judah and the scepter and the star prophecies are not these are later connections made by later readers to what starts in this story. So I think maybe, to sum all that up, I'd say like the ideological reading, I think is part of what's happening here, as well as setting up this conflict between these two lineages, right? The blessing for one and the curse to the other. Does that make sense?
Totally. And at the very least, it's a materialization. The whole curse is materialized. The whole enmity, between man and woman, perhaps between people.
Now, there is not now, and I will say this too: there is absolutely not a clear connection between this text and anything messianic or anything to do with the ruler of the last days. These are things that end up getting layered on top, right? And Christianity leans into that. So, well, maybe let's watch this video, and you can speed it up a bit, and then we can maybe call it a night after that, eh?
All right.
This has been super fun, by the way.
I'm glad.
This first gospel. We mentioned it yesterday. We're going to talk about it today. Smooth transition.
Yeah, if you want to know more about it, his name's Brian Wolfmueller, and he is a Lutheran pastor out of Austin, Texas. But he does a lot of like theology from the car sort of thing on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pew! Genesis 3:15. Here it is. Look, we even got out the bold tip for the Genesis 3:15, for the Proto-Evangelium, for the very first gospel, for the fountain from which flow all the messianic prophecies of the Old Testament.
All of them.
This
All of
text
them
here
flow.
is perhaps one of the most beautiful. And I would
He's
suggest
quite
the most
entertaining.
important to understand
Awesome.
the Old Testament, but it comes to us as a riddle. Now, remember the backstory. God created Adam and Eve in the garden, and here comes the devil to tempt them, the serpent, the dragon, it says in Revelation chapter 12. And Adam and Eve are now there. They reach and they take the fruit, they eat of the fruit, and there's a double death that occurs here. Don't worry. Even if I draw Adam and Eve unclothed, nobody knows the difference.
That's pretty cute.
So Adam and Eve are in the garden, they eat it, and they recognize that they are naked, and so they run and they hide.
So
from the
pause
Lord.
it for a second, because I should say something. He mentioned the double death.
Right.
I think right. I think what he's getting at here, and one of the common Christian readings of this text, the way that they encounter the way that they resolve this question of how is it that they didn't die on that day as God said. Well, one of the resolutions to that is, well, they died spiritually.
Right.
And I've seen that I don't know how common this is, but I've certainly seen it. This is less so among scholars because this is foolish, this is silly, but certainly Christian readers will look at the text. The Hebrew in that passage employs a feature of language called the infinitive absolute, which is a way of emphasizing the strength of the verb. And the way you do it is you use this verbal feature, the infinitive absolute, connected to a verbal expression. So you're repeating the verb. And if you were to read it literally, as the translator of the Septuagint does, you would say, dying, you will die with death, or something like that,
Mhm.
right? So when I've seen some Christian commenters look at this text and say, well, it uses death twice, right? The verb is repeated. So one of these is actually spiritual death, and the other one is physical death, and it's going to happen way later. So, but
Well,
that's
yeah.
nonsense, okay? Anyways, let's.
The other one too was in there, the connection in from Revelation to the dragon. Isn't
Right,
that
yes.
a seven-headed dragon? Isn't that something else completely?
Oh, sure. Now that, and yeah, and that's now I think Revelation is connecting that dragon. I do think he's connecting that dragon to this story. Because it's the woman who gives birth, and the dragon is waiting to devour what the woman gives birth to, right? I think it's an allusion to this story, but that creature is they're also drawing from other texts in the Bible which mention the Leviathan,
Right.
this seven-headed serpent that you see it in Isaiah, you see it in the Psalms, you see it in the book of Job, you see it in the Baal cycle
The
at
primordial
Ugarit, right?
monster, right?
Yeah,
But I don't.
it's this primordial chaos monster.
For me to conceive of a primordial monster in the garden, it doesn't make sense.
No, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And that's not who the Nachash in the garden story is. That's a later conflation of separate things.
Nice.
Amongst the trees of the garden. Now remember that there, in the bushes, is Adam and Eve and the dragon, the serpent that's there with them. They're friends, and Adam and Eve are dressed in their fig leaves, etc. This, by the way, is the occasion of the funniest joke that I ever made, and it goes like this. So Adam, after they get their fig leaves on, Eve comes out from around the bush, and she says, Adam, what do you think? These are my fall colors. Fall colors. Wow. Anyway, this is the fall into sin, and one of the worst of all of the Bible passages occurs right before this. Is that Adam and Eve hear the Lord walking in the sound of the Lord walking in the garden, and they hid themselves. And this hiding from God is in fact the first death It's the spiritual death. Remember, God's
Wow.
No, that's so clear, isn't it?
Wow. So, I should say something else too about Yahweh walking in the garden. The form of the verb there is it's pretty unusual. It's not just him. The verb is halak, and very
Mhm.
common with enormous frequency throughout the Bible. You know, when people are walking, it's just the regular strong verbal form. In Genesis chapter 3, it uses a conjugation. We call it the hitpael, which is usually it has a reflexive meaning that it's something that you do to yourself. In this instance, where it occurs with the word halak, meaning to walk, it seems like this is customary activity, as in this is the way, it's something that you do on a regular basis. But the other really interesting thing about this form of the word is it's used in a couple of key instances. It's used here to describe what Yahweh's doing in the garden. It's used of Enoch in Genesis chapter 5 when Enoch walked with God and then he was no more. It's the same verb.
Mhm.
It's used of the Satan in the book of Job when God questions the Satan and says, where have you been and what have you been doing? He says,
Oh,
I've been walking around.
the whole through, what is it? I've been walking through and
Walking
fro,
around to and fro.
to
Yeah.
and fro. Yeah,
But
there you go.
it's the same form of the verb there. So I tend to think there is some connection of uh of this form of this verb to divine activity. So this is something that is connected to
And it
what the
falls in
gods
line
do.
with the anthropomorphic understanding of God from the
Yeah, that too,
Hebrew.
right? Like God walks
Mhm.
around in the garden and they hide from him and he doesn't know where they are.
Right. Yeah.
said, on the day that you eat of it,
Maybe Yahweh had also died spiritually, and that's why he didn't know where they were.
dying, you will die. There'll be a double death, and this is the first
See,
death, running and
see,
hiding
he
from God.
said it.
We could
Dying,
spend
you
all
will
day talking
die.
about
There will
this, but
be a
we got to get
double
onto the
death.
text. So
No,
the
Yep.
Lord
no. It just the proper way to translate that is you will surely die, or you are definitely going to die. That's what the infinitive absolute does. Okay.
Nice.
calls Adam and Eve out from behind the bushes, and he stands them up in front of them. And now he's going to go down. So he's going to start with Adam, then Eve, and then the serpent. And
Well,
he's going to say
pause it for a
to
second.
Adam,
I'll just say
why
something
did you do
else
this?
quickly. That is, I think, kind of interesting is that the text also says that specifically that the man and the woman hid in the tree, like in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know what to do with that, but it's kind of interesting.
Never thought of that.
So I
Yeah.
told you were naked. Did you eat from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from, etc., etc.? Adam just say, the woman that you gave to be with me, she gave me the fruit and I ate. So then Eve says, well, the serpent deceived me and I ate. And then the Lord doesn't talk to the serpent. He doesn't ask the serpent anything at all. He just speaks to the serpent. And in verse 14 says, you got to go on the dust. You don't have legs anymore. But then 15, the Lord turns and speaks directly to Satan, to the devil himself. And
Not
he
to
speaks
Satan.
these words.
Right, yeah.
Okay. So the I there, we got to identify the pronouns. I is the Lord. I will put enmity between thee, that is the devil, and the woman, Eve. Okay. So now, so it's God talking to the devil. That's an amazing thing to us, that this first gospel message is spoken by the Lord to the devil. And we don't want to move too quickly past.
I mean, is that also to say that perhaps before this happened, that Adam and Eve were not at enmity with the devil? Like, what does that mean? Like,
Right. He even said it that they were friends. But that is kind of strange.
it
That
is
is sort
pretty
of on a Christian understanding of this text. That is a bit of a strange reading that they were all friends in the garden before this happened.
right.
I
And
don't
that's the
know.
thing when you stretch out these interpretations, and it just seems silly.
Agreed.
The word enmity, because if we just look at the situation of things here and we say, where is enmity? Well, at this point, right now, when God is speaking this, if you have Adam and you have Eve and you have God, and you have the devil. The only place that there's not enmity is right here. I mean, there's peace between God, between Adam and the devil, between Eve and the devil, but there's discord here between Adam and Eve, between Adam and God, between Eve and God. There's
See, he has to add another thing
Wow.
in order to make what he just said right.
Like, where is any of that in the text, right?
Mm-mm.
Like, it's just yeah, you just gotta pretend you you squint really hard, and you look between the lines, and you just put stuff in there,
Yeah.
is how you do this, yeah. It's, no, it's, there is there's no sense from the text itself that there's enmity between God, the man, and the woman. It's just not there.
Mm-hmm.
there's enmity all over the place, except for right here. And the Lord says, "Nuh-uh. That's not how it's going to be. I will put enmity between you and the woman." The Lord wants the fight to be here. God will be on our side, and we will be fighting against the devil.
Like, another problem I have with this, that and it goes to the point that you brought up, is like based on his interpretation. Like, there's a couple things here that I'm thinking of. Like, first of all, I believe, like, the Christian understanding, the Christian interpretation of this story and of the garden. I mentioned this earlier. This is a paradise that was created for the benefit of humankind. Like, it was for them. It was their place to live peacefully and in harmony and tranquility for all eternity, is what the garden was. And yet, how does that work if prior to this moment there's just enmity between all these people? Or is his point that by eating the fruit it's created the enmity? Maybe that's it. It's created the enmity between Adam and Eve and God, and they're on the devil's side in this moment, and now he's like, no, you're coming to my side and I want you to fight with the devil. Is that it?
And does that fit the context of a curse that's being pronounced? Like, it doesn't sound
Well,
like
I
a
mean,
curse.
he curses the woman, right? He just glossed right over that. And yeah, he doesn't curse the man, he curses the ground. So I don't know. It is, I think it's all very reaching to see all this stuff in there. It also sounds like God just wants you to fight with someone. So, you might as well fight with the devil.
Yeah. It's like, gosh darn it, they ate of that tree. Now I gotta create this whole chaos.
Yes,
Um,
yes. That'll make it better.
yeah. All right, let's see. I think there are a few things more that he says we can comment
When
on.
the Lord says, "I'll put
Okay.
enmity between thee and the woman," he's reversing things from how they are. He's undoing the first curse. And then it goes on and says, "And between thy seed and her seed." Now,
When he says he's undoing the first curse, is he talking about, because before that he says you will, what he says before that is, you are cursed, you will crawl on the ground on your belly and eat dust.
Mm-hmm.
And before that he cursed the woman and said, I will, increase your pain in labor, in childbirth, and your desire will be for your husband, your man, and he's going to rule over you.
Mm-hmm.
So is he which one of those curses is he reversing with this?
I think maybe what he had in mind was the so-called curse between the enmity between God and Adam and Eve.
Oh, which is not actually a curse. It's never mentioned, or
It's never mentioned. Yeah.
So okay,
It's
you just
yeah.
right, got it.
neither one of these seeds makes sense. That the devil doesn't have any seed, because the devil as a spirit does not have children. So that
They're gonna play fast and loose with that.
Oh yeah, they are.
And then also, I want you to talk about the whole plural seed versus singular seed, and how that's not what they're trying to do here. But
Oh, does he suggest that some of these are plurals?
well, I think if he doesn't do it, I've heard it from others that have said
Okay.
that because it's
All right.
singular seed,
Right.
then that means it was Jesus.
So now I'll just well, when if he says something about that,
Sounds good.
so
No choice.
but I hold on.
Okay.
I do want to say that this does make perfect sense if we understand this in the context of some of the stuff that's following, right? Where you've got the founding of this motif that's picked up on later in texts of God blessing and cursing different lineages.
Mhm.
And also, if you see in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, that Cain is at least implied to be the offspring of the the snake and the woman. So, that does make some sense.
Hmm.
And I don't have to twist myself into knots, attempting to establish that. Okay.
Mhm. Which he's gonna do for sure.
Children
Oh,
of the
yes.
devil. Okay, and also that the seed is her seed also doesn't make sense. Every other place in the Bible, when it talks about seed, it belongs to the man. Okay,
Well,
so
that's
this
just
already
not
is a
that's just not true.
Nice.
Right, there are there are at least 3 or 4 places in the Hebrew Bible where it talks about the seed of a specific woman. And importantly, like, I should say this. So this word here, this is zerah in Hebrew.
Mhm.
It means just basically seed, right? Seed that you plant in the ground. Semen, it means that too. But most of the time, a better translation for this word is offspring or progeny. So these are just your descendants. So a woman can have
Oh,
descendants, which is clearly how it's functioning in this text. And like this is the so
yeah.
this is the same thing that Richard Carrier does when he botches Romans chapter 1 verse 3 by insisting that the word there is sperm or semen. It's not. I mean, I suppose it could be on a strictly literal reading of the text, but a sophisticated reader who understands the languages and the importance of context in reading this literature will know that this is just the Hebrew way of saying descendants.
And just because it's in the singular case
Yeah, right. So let's no,
doesn't mean that it's
that
referring to
is
one descendant, because
no, it
yeah.
doesn't. It's just it's collective in the same way that the word Adam, which is the name that we've attached to the first man in the Hebrew Bible, can also function as a term for the collective, for all of humanity, is very often referred to in the biblical text as Adam.
And I've also heard too, like if you're a farmer and you need seed, you go to the store and you get seed. But
Oh,
if you tell your wife, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the store to get seed," she's not expecting that you're gonna come back with just one seed.
that's true, right?
Nor would you say, "Hey,
Well,
I need to go
this
get
works
some
in English.
seeds." Yeah, it
Yeah.
still works in English. So let's not force it. All right, let's see what else is there.
bit of a furthering of the riddle, but let's just talk it through. So if the devil can't have children, there's not little baby demons running around. What is the seed or what is the offspring of the devil? We identify two things: sin and death. The devil
So
came to kill and steal and
is there is there a text even anywhere that that informs us that this is what the seed is of the devil? Like I can't think of anything. It's certainly not, again, not native to the text. As I mentioned before, words we commonly translate as sin or iniquity are absent from this story. This is not death is not implied by the usage of the term here, nor anywhere as far as I am aware. This is just something that this guy made up because this is the only way that he can make sense of what's happening in this story to conform to his pre-existing theological model.
Right. And notice that he has to sort of paint this whole picture. I mean, I think we have a term for that.
Right.
It's called gaslighting. Creating an alternative reality where this makes sense. Because
yes,
unless we do that, then it doesn't. So I think the last thing he's going to talk about is the bruising. And how that basically talks about the Messiah in the future.
Awesome.
This is the seed, Christ. You shall bruise his heel. Now this crush or this bruise, it reminds us of how it is with a serpent. Here is a serpent. Look, oh my goodness. That's like a miraculously good serpent that I accidentally drew. Okay, let me not get carried away. Let me just leave it in its native glory. Woo, wow. I'm excited. And you have a dude coming along, a guy who comes along, and this is a foot, and he's going to crush the head of the serpent while the serpent bruises his heel. So that's the picture that you're going to get there. But this crushing means to deliver a death blow.
See, you heard him say crush.
Yes.
So now the devil is going to...
Yeah. Okay, no, let him continue for a second, and then I'll
have a death blow delivered, a permanent death blow upon the head, but the seed is going to have a death blow dealt on his heel. In other words, it'll be a death blow, but not of the same sort. A death blow that doesn't end in death, but actually...
What?
I mean, if I get bit on my heel by a rattlesnake, I'm going to... Yeah.
The result of a death blow is that you die. That's what it is. You can't have a death blow that you recover from. It's so dumb. And I think it was it might be Rashi when he dealt with this passage. He says, he says this, right? You can kill a snake by stepping on its head, but he can also kill you by biting you on the heel. You can die from that. That's just as bad. It's like a saw off. It's not a declaration of triumph for one over the other. It's just not.
Yeah, totally not.
Ends in life. So now let's just take the whole thing together. The Lord says, I'll put enmity between you, Eve, and the woman, or between you, devil, and the woman, Eve, between your seed and her seed. It shall crush thy head. He shall crush thy head. So he will kill you, and you will crush his heel. You will deliver him a death blow that won't result in death. Now, one more thing to make note of, and is to say that while Adam and Eve were strong and mighty according to their native creation, they did not have the strength to destroy the devil. And that the devil, as the highest of the angels and spirit beings, that capacity, that strength, that power belongs only to God.
Where did you come up with that?
So, yeah, that is, all of that is just not in the story, right? It just,
So that
craziness.
If the seed of the woman is crushing the head of the devil, then that child is going to be also God. So we have already here in this first verse, in this beautiful text,
on so many levels, you just have to read into, and maybe we need to shut it down. But I think, just on so many levels, you have to read so much into the text that just is not there in order to make some kind of connection between this and the messianic prophecies in the New Testament. Now, I will also say that this is just part and parcel of what everyone was doing, in the first century. This is just the way the people, early Jewish people read their literature. So I'm not saying, don't hear me saying that this is something that the New Testament is doing duplicitously or out of order or inappropriately. Right? This is just the way this literature worked. But importantly, you have to be really, really, really creative
Yeah.
to make these connections.
And
If
I
you're
think that
interested,
I was going to say that in antiquity, perhaps would it be right to say that it would have been okay for you to do this sort of Mishnah, right, where you're kind
yeah,
of reading or
midrash,
adding another
this midrash,
midrash,
yeah,
another layer, interpretive layer upon interpretive layer. But it's when you say, no, 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 this is what that means. This is
yeah,
the
right,
interpretation, and therefore this doctrine. That's when the ancients would have been like, wait a minute, what are you talking about?
yeah. So if you're
So,
interested in knowing what these texts said in their, in their original context, and then how the biblical writers handled them over time, that's great. But that's not, you don't get that from just reading the New Testament and smashing that back on this story. I would say the story is actually much more interesting and much more fun in its own right, in its own context, without the layers,
right.
right? So and that's what I'm about. I'm really interested in stripping off the layers, just like that snake.
That's right. Yeah. Just like it. Yeah. Well, Dr.
Oh,
Kipp, this has been so much fun.
this has
And
been
I
a
want
lot
to
of
thank you
fun.
for
Yes,
allowing me to come in on your channel and do this together. This has been great. Very,
absolutely. Yeah, no, this has been fabulous. So, I will just say, everyone, if you haven't already, you should subscribe to Apostate of Mind. He does some really, really good stuff over there, along with his